Hello and welcome to Global Lava. My name is Darren Ng. I'm the Executive Director of Lava, and we have a fantastic show for you today on Israel and the many opportunities both going there and the technologies that are coming here. Before we start, we're getting going before everyone is logged into the system. I can see people are still adding up. I will tell you a little bit about Lava, and then we'll get going quickly because we have the Consulate General who is on a schedule, and we need to get him in and out. But we're really happy to have him with us today. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with Lava, we represent the ecosystem that is the Los Angeles venture ecosystem. We're a giant mesh network of many little siloed communities, and we're here to help facilitate communication, collaboration, and deal flow between each of the communities. One of those communities is a set of folks who are looking to either take their products overseas or to import things into our ecosystem. And so that's the function of Global Lava. We do a number of series. There's a whole bunch of other communities within Lava, including Lava Space, Lava FinTech. Go check out the website and you can see. The next event actually happens to be another Global Lava event. On May 5th, we'll be celebrating African World Heritage Day. Yes, it's also May 5th is Cinco de Mayo, we realize. But we'll be working with the US government, Prosper Africa's program, and they're putting a lot of funding in. So there's a lot of money to be had for your startup, whether you're taking it there or bringing something here from the Prosper Africa program, and something you should be aware of. Next Saturday, May 8th, is the first, since under my tenure, it'll be the first time we do our first time entrepreneur workshop program. So if you're an entrepreneur, you should check, and you're looking for some training, you should check that out. It's a Saturday for a few hours, and it really helps you go through your checklist. On May 19th, Lava FinTech or FinTech Lava will be working with Ernst & Young, and we'll be doing an event on how to set up your back office to make you more fundable and de-risk a lot of things. On May 20th, the next day on Thursday, Lava Gaming brings you Riot Games. So we're really excited about that. There's a ton of other programs. I'm going to stop talking right now, other than to just ask you if you know of a local company that has recently raised a round of funding and successfully closed that round. Please email me, darren@lava.org, and let me know that has happened, because we want to highlight all those successes both in our emails, and we'll be doing some programs like this one on that. Without further ado, I want to introduce our two co-chairs of Global Lava, Sharon Rebinder and Michael McClune. I will let them introduce themselves because I know we're on the clock. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Michael. Congratulations on being double vaxxed, and take it away.
Thanks. Thanks. So I'm Sharon Rebinder. My day job is to promote the Grenoble area in France and the Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes region as a location to do business, to try to help people understand opportunities, companies in North America. And I also do the opposite, help companies from that region and in France in general to understand opportunities and make connections here in Southern California. I'm based in Southern California, and also I cover North America. So I'm very happy to co-chair Global Lava with Michael McClune. I'm not going to talk much anymore, but we're very happy to have Israel represented here today and to learn about opportunities there. Thanks to Fox Rothschild for sponsoring and for moderating. Michael Sweet will be moderating in a few minutes.
Thanks, Sharon. My name is Michael McClune. I run the International Business Accelerator. We are a nonprofit business acceleration program where we take, for example, today, Israeli companies who want to come here to the US market, set up operations, establish a presence. And we also help US companies trade their products, their goods, their services, their tech platforms into Israel and any other country they want. So thank you for everyone for being here. I should also reiterate what Darren mentioned. Our next event for Global Lava will be May 5th, which will be what I would like to unofficially call it is free money from the government for the creative economy to trade with Africa. So recently we had the AGOA Act, which is the African Growth and Opportunities Act, which essentially makes the entire continent of Africa a free trade district with the US and with one another. So there are tremendous opportunities. It's put together by USAID, the United States Agency for International Development. They have a lot of money to spend and a lot of tools and resources and partnership opportunities for companies to increase trade either way with Africa and the US. So our esteemed guest, Hillel Newman, who's the Consul General for Israel in the Pacific Southwest. He's going to talk a little bit about how great Israel is, why it's called the Startup Nation, and what everyone in the startup and the high growth industry of business refers to as the miracle of how the public sector and the private sector creates such an entrepreneurial ecosystem and the fertility that has come from it recently. So with that, hello, can you enlighten us a little bit about the opportunities and why Israel's called the Startup Nation? And I recommend the book, also called Startup Nation by, is it Sinor? I think Michael Sweet, you could talk about that later. So hello, please.
Yes, thank you. I'm trying to open the video, but it's blocked by you guys. Yes, hi there. Thank you so much for inviting me. It is my pleasure. Global Lover, thank you for the wonderful work that you do. It is truly my pleasure to join in this event together with you. I'd like to thank, of course, Darren and the co-chairs, Sharon, Michael, and of course also Sharon from the California Israel Chamber of Commerce, and the UpWest and Fox Rothschild, all the partners. Thank you all for convening this important forum. I'd like to open with a small apology. Unfortunately, I have to drop off after my words because I have an iftar dinner event at my home this evening, together with the Consul General of United Arab Emirates and some distinguished guests. And my home is like in a real balagan, as they say. Okay, I'll open up with brief words, talking perhaps what is the unique thing about Israel, and also what is going on in Israel-California relations, which I think will be most interesting for the viewers. But I'll start with the big picture, zoom out for a second, and just mention that the global economy is going through a transition. We're going through a shift. And if you look at the top 10 companies about a decade and a half ago, you would see a totally different list to the top 10 companies today. About a decade and a half ago, you would see companies like ExxonMobil, Gazprom, Royal Dutch Shell, BP, PetroChina. And if you look at the top 10 in our generation, you would see companies like Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, Facebook, Alibaba, etc. So you can see that there's a dramatic change that is taking place, and it's moving from natural resources towards what we call innovation or artificial intelligence. And that puts Israel in a unique situation. Israel, has been termed already the startup nation, because Israel, from its reestablishment already, a decade or so after its reestablishment in 1948, it stressed innovation and ingenuity. There are many different explanations of why this happened. Some say because we did not have natural resources, while our neighbors, we were in a tough neighborhood, and our neighbors had all these resources, wealth of gas and oil and other natural resources which we did not have. So we had to move towards innovation. And for many years, we cried the fact that we have to build on innovation and brain power while all our neighbors have all these rich resources. And now today we see how it pays off, because even these countries that have natural resources are now looking to change and shift towards more productivity, more innovation, and more ingenuity, more artificial intelligence. That is the direction of the world. That's the way the world is going. And the truth is that COVID-19 has just accelerated it even further. The king of the future will be artificial intelligence. Israel, during these years, has established itself as a startup nation. We are ranked first by VS Investment R&D in per capita in innovation. We're fifth. We ranked fifth in the most innovative country. We have a skilled workforce. We have many languages. The other additional aspect which is quite unique to Israel is that we have this wonderful mix of cultures and of immigration waves. So we have many of those who speak Russian, many who speak English, many who speak German, European languages. We have a real mix of culture, and we have a very skilled workforce. So this poses Israel in a very unique position. Well, I'm sure you've all heard of the great achievements of Israel. Israel has been at the foundation of the building of what we call the new advanced technology, whether it be the chips for the computers, whether it be the chips for the cell phones, whether it be Waze, Mobileye, automation, smart mobility, smart cities. Israel is behind all of these things. And let me just give 2 examples to make it a bit amusing. You know, Israel at the beginning of its life, it tried to go into the automobile industry. And Israel manufactured a car, which was called Susita. And it was a total failure because Israel centralized its efforts on the hardware of the car. We can't compete with Ford and these big companies. But then Israel swerved and moved towards the technology and the sensors and the smart elements of the car. And today Israel is a leading factor. We have more than 400 companies just in what we call smart transportation or smart mobility. And we have like a company like Mobileye, which is one of the leading companies in automation of cars. I'll give another example. At the beginning, the country of Israel established itself on the export of oranges. But today, Israel exports the engineering of the oranges, the making, the precise irrigation aspects, like a company like Netafim, which conquered the market in the field of precise irrigation. So the key element here is the use of technology, modern technology, in order to make things better in all fields. And this touches really on every field. Another thing I'd add is that there are there's another one big opportunity that is opening up besides the trend towards innovation. It's also the fact that Israel is now expanding its relations in the Arab world, normalizing its relations with the Persian Gulf, UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, Morocco. I can go on. So this is also opening up new markets in one go. And I can tell you that here in California, I get calls all the time on how people can join in this wagon of peace, in this talking of expanding relations, economic relations in the entire region. We're now talking regionally. Israel is not only just Israel and its neighbor, it's Israel and the whole region, the Middle East region. And Israel is in that very unique position, being the one and only democracy in the Middle East, which has the special connection also with the United States and with Europe. Now let's talk about Israel and United States. You know, we have a wonderful foundation, which is the free trade agreements, which were already signed in the 70s of last generation. And then we also have the major non-state ally agreement, which put Israel in a unique position. It was signed in the 80s. And then we have special MOUs, which were signed between Israel and California, signed by the Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu, and the Governor of California, and several supplements afterwards, which gave a meat to the MOU. And the MOU really laid the foundation for all types of cooperation in the future, especially innovation, water technology, cybersecurity, and things like that. There's also, besides the formal relationship between Israel and the United States and Israel and California, there's also the informal. And the informal is the special Judeo-Christian heritage, which is common, the strategic alliance between Israel and the United States, the deep-seated values of democracy and liberty, all these things which are shared by Israel and the United States. California is in a special situation for cooperation with Israel, mainly because California stresses these exact topics which Israel stresses, whether it be innovation, artificial intelligence, ingenuity. You know, Silicon Valley rules #1 in the world in the aspect of startups, but the #2 after Silicon Valley is Israel. So and there is a lot of common ground for us to join together. There are also many things that assist those who want to do business between Israel and California, Israel and the United States. And I'll mention a few. First of all, the whole startup environment. Many Israeli companies have set up base in the United States, in California, in the Silicon Valley, in Southern California. This is a wonderful model of how things work. In fact, just about every Israeli company sets up a base of at least of marketing or production of some kind in the United States in order to reach out to the United States. Mainly the R&D is in Israel, but the marketing is based usually in the United States. In addition, we also have incubators and facilitators. If I just mention a few just from California, then we have, of course, the Milken Institute of Innovation, which encourages such cooperation. We have Infusion LA, which was set up by Vardy, and we have the Paul Mirage Institute. So we have different bodies. Besides that, we also have funds which assist. We have the Bird Fund and the Bard Foundation, and also the BSF and the Chambers of Commerce. So we have a large ground of support and a strong foundation for any person or company that wants to do business with Israel. If you look at the fields, what are the fields of interest? I would say that we should look towards the future, and COVID-19, the swerve towards innovation and artificial intelligence also gives us the fields of the future. And the fields of the future are for instance, the following: telemedicine, remote diagnostics, healthcare, biotech, smart cities, smart mobility, drones, the use of drones, cybersecurity, streaming services, water technologies, self-reliance, food security, renewable energy, big fields for the future. So, and every single one of these fields has tremendous potential in California. And in fact, some of them have already been advanced and promoted, and companies are already working. If I give a few examples of companies that are working successfully in California, joint ventures of US and Israeli companies working together in California, let me just give a few examples. For instance, we have IDE Technologies, which is an Israeli company in the water field, which has set up desalination plants in Southern California. They actually manage 2 desalination plants. And they also are entering the entire field of what we call water purification and recycling of wastewater. If I just mention in this context, you know, Israel has the highest proportion of recycling of wastewater in the world. We're above 86%. There is no other country that reaches that level. And, you know, they used to talk about the fact that water would be perhaps one of the triggers of war or conflict in the Middle East, especially in the relations between Israel, Jordan, and Egypt. Well, we solved this problem with desalination. We now give water to Jordan and the Palestinians. So this has been removed off the table as an issue of conflict. And that just shows how technology can change an entire environment and bring about a new reality in a region. If I give another example, for instance, drip irrigation, Netafim is very active. Also here in California, we have even a model farm in the Southern California area, where you can see Israeli technologies. You can testify and see them yourselves. And this is just another example of what we can expand. For instance, a company called Amiad, which is dealing in filtration solutions and wastewater treatment, and other companies. If I just mention the health, we have a very good company here like Surgical Theater, which gives a 3D imagery of the human body, of the specific human body. And that enables surgery at a very high level. And brain surgery, for instance, in the past, there were many people that could not be operated on, and they just died, they passed away. And due to this modern technology, which is actually taken from simulation of fighter pilots, they adapted the same technology from simulation of fighter planes to the human brain. And they give a 3D of the specific human brain, and that way a surgeon can see the brain before they go into the actual surgery. These are just examples how technology can change things completely. Another big aspect of California, of course, is the Hollywood industries, entertainment industries, where Israel has also penetrated immensely. We have tremendous successes, whether it be on the performer level or whether it be on the creators level, content creation, animation. We have companies that are working here like Keshet International and New Legend and the Jerusalem Film Foundation. A lot is going on in that field as well. So I just wanted to give like an opening general view of what is the potential. The potential is, the sky is the limit, in fact, beyond the sky, because we're now going to scientific cooperation even in the space. but everything can be done. And the modern technology touches just about on every single field of living, from health to agriculture to the smart running of cities and automobiles. So everything is there. We have a lot of foundation of support. The chambers, which I mentioned before, is important that people work with the chambers, and we can help also as a consulate in matching companies and matching you with counterparts, whoever is interested in finding a partner. There are also many funds that support also joint ventures, hedge funds that support such joint ventures between Israel and the United States, Israel and California. That's it for now. I'm sorry I can't stay for the whole program. I would have loved to, but I have an evening event in my home. I hope that you found this interesting. Thank you very much for inviting me, Global Lava.
Thank you, Mr. Consul General. I appreciate that. Great stuff. Have fun with your dinner tonight. I understand. I know what a Consul General's home is like. It's a very much it's like a train station of international VIPs. So thank you very much. We appreciate that. I would like to introduce Michael Sweet from Fox Rothschild. Fox Rothschild is not only one of the great supporters of Lava in general, also in Global Lava. The managing partner of the LA office, the leader of the LA office, Emily, is the chair of Women in Lava and very active in all of Lava. In fact, I talked to Emily both today and yesterday, independent of Lava. So she's one of the leaders of our startup ecosystem as well. So Michael, I'll leave it to you to introduce your fellow panelists, if you may.
I'd be happy to.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Michael, and thanks to Global Lava for having us, to Sharon and Darren for making this happen. My name is Michael Sweet. I'm in San Francisco right now. In the days I used to travel, I would also spend time in our LA office. Hopefully I'll do that again soon. And I look forward to that. I also share our Israel practice for Fox Rothschild. Fox Rothschild has a robust practice representing both American companies doing business in Israel and Israeli companies coming to the United States to do business here. And it's a privilege to work with Israeli companies and learn so much about the ingenuity and the work that the Israeli companies are doing with their startups as they bring their technology to market, and helping to be a part of that. So that's very exciting for us. We have two other speakers here, and we're going to have a little discussion for the next half hour or so. Sharon Bannock runs the California Israel Chamber of Commerce, and Gil Ben-Artzi runs UpWest Labs. They are both Israelis living here in California and helping make the connection between the Israeli companies and the California market, and they're great resources, and I'm sure we'll find a way to make them available to you if you have questions in the future about how you might be able to connect with some of the Israeli companies. So with that, I'll ask Gil and Sharon to talk a little bit about what they do and what their organizations do, and then we'll cover a few points that I think folks would like to hear more about. Gil, why don't you go first?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the Lava organization for inviting us. Thank you, Michael. So my name is Gil. I'm the founding partner at UpWest. UpWest is a pre-seed and seed stage fund that has been around since 2012. And as Michael described, we back Israeli founders that are targeting the US market and are looking to keep the tech in Israel, but build the business in the US and in most cases in California. Since 2012, we've invested in 85 such companies that have gone on to raise close to $2 billion in follow-on financing. Those companies are innovating in the fields of cybersecurity, financial technologies, agricultural technologies, digital healthcare, and many other important sectors. Yeah, that's it. Thank you for having me.
Sharon.
Hi, let me see if I can turn my camera on. It was blocked a second ago. If the host can release my camera, you can see my face also. Otherwise, you'll. Okay, here we go. Hi, can you see me now?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Hi, everyone. My name is Sharon Vanek. I'm the Executive Director of the California Israel Chamber of Commerce, known as the CICC. The CICC is a non-for-profit organization, is actually an industry-based organization, which means that we were founded some 24 years ago by a group of business people that wanted to come together and create what we all know nowadays as an ecosystem or a network. You know, those are the days before LinkedIn and all the social media that we are aware of. Really with the mission to support different stakeholders in the different industries here in California to learn more about Israel and the opportunities in Israel, something very similar to what we do now over Zoom, and at the same time also support the different stakeholders in Israel to better understand what are the opportunities here in California. I say here because I am based in San Francisco. We also have an office in Israel. As I said, we've been around for over 20 years and we are active in the different tech industries or verticals nowadays. It's not really industries, everything is, you know, there is an interconvergence, everything mixed together. You know, we talked earlier about something similar to what Gil and of course the Consul General also mentioned, from agrotechnology to cybersecurity, from space technology to education and so on and so forth. And when I say stakeholders, we don't work only with the different businesses, we also work with you know, government agencies, with academia, with hospitals, with research centers, with different corporate. So really from two guys in a garage, if I can use the word, you know, use the term guys, all the way to, you know, billions of dollars corporates that are around here. So this is what we do. And thank you for having me.
Well, thank you, Sharon and Gil. Let's talk about who comes from Israel to California and why. What are the types of companies and ventures and entrepreneurs that you work with that are coming here now, and what do you see? What do you expect to see in the years to come?
Who do you want to go first?
Sharon, ladies first.
Okay, thank you. So when we look at the entrepreneurs that are coming from Israel, you know, we see almost every industry or every technology that you can imagine. I always tell people that I have the best job in the world because I meet so many amazing people with great ideas. And Israel is a very small market. And when we talk about, you know, economy of scales and all those buzzwords, the US is a very natural place for companies that want to grow. They use the Israeli market many times as a beta site, you know, to test their technologies, but they really need to see how it works in a bigger scale. And this is when they come to the US. Typically they will start with, you know, hiring one salesperson or someone for business development, and later on they will open some sort of an entity here in the US. Primarily one of the co-founders will move to the US really to open up the market and to scale up. So if you talk about specific industries, we see them from food tech and agriculture, you know, agricultural technologies, not just water, really all the way to one of the leading space technologies that is based in Silicon Valley, to insurance technologies and so on. So those are the ones that come from Israel to California. Of course, we also have in California Israelis that have been here for many years, some of them for not that many years, that came with one company and moved to another, and then they started their own business, their own startup, and within a relatively very short time, became what we call the elderlies of the tribe, because now they are those that give mentorship to the newcomers in the market. So this is the people that we see that are coming to California, and those that already here that came, and how they support the newcomers.
You have anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, it's exactly what Sharon said. It's what's interesting, and I think what we have seen is changes in the last 10, 20 years. If in the past it would be maybe the founders arriving in the US after they've already established a company in Israel and raised a bunch of money, and then they hire an American CEO perhaps and the supporting ecosystem. What we have seen over time are a few changes. One, they come much earlier to the US, so not necessarily after raising tens of millions of dollars, but maybe just at the early stage. And secondly, the founders that move from Israel to the US are looking to stay as CEOs and then augment the team with fantastic local talent, mostly around marketing and sales. So that's been a second change. And the third change is, I think, again, going back 10 years ago, you would probably see, and still do to some extent, a lot of deep tech around maybe cybersecurity, perhaps around DevOps and other B2B enterprises. I think over the years, we have seen new domains emerge, and Sharon mentioned a few, like in insurance technologies, fintech, and others. So you really see a much more varied type of technologies of companies coming to the US.
Yes. Another thing that I would like to mention, we talk about the entrepreneurs that come here. There is another tier or segment of people that come to the US and, specifically to California, and those are the researchers that coming primarily from medical technologies, what we know nowadays is biodesign. So those are people that not necessarily have just the medical background, but there is a combination. For those of you who do not know what biodesign is, it's actually taking the business aspect together with the medical aspect and building together technology that provide a solution for both the medical needs, but also looking at the business aspects of that. So we see actually quite a lot of postdoctorate researchers coming to the different institutions here in California for medical, also in agriculture and others, for their advanced education. And we see great collaboration between universities here in California and those in Israel, and also between hospitals. And we see a lot of technologies coming out of those collaborations. It starts in research for academic purposes, but then it transfers to the business world.
What is it, in your mind, what is it that makes Israel, it makes Israelis so tuned into entrepreneurship, and why do we see so many startups per capita coming out of Israel?
Yeah, I'm happy to take this one to start with. So I think Hillel mentioned quite a few reasons earlier on. I think it's a lot of the upbringing. Again, I grew up in Israel for all of my childhood and served in the military, and I was educated. And I think the environment in Israel is such that you're sort of taught entrepreneurship through your life, whether it's in the military, and then when you aspire to sort of build, I don't know, and Sharon can probably share it. You want to be an entrepreneur. You don't want to work for someone else. You feel you can do anything. The example that Hillel mentioned around the car in Israel. So it's a lot about, I think, the DNA and what folks are trying to do. A couple of other points to mention is the education system is fantastic. And also kudos to the government. Yes, the government for investing a disproportionate amount over the last 30 years in both seeding the venture community, in government grants, it's really unparalleled in the world, and that has been a phenomenal infrastructure to build on. And then why did they come to the U.S.? I think growing up in Israel, you would ask, why would you come and why not Europe, which is closer, Asia? But for some reason, the U.S. has always been the first country. Maybe it's the pop culture, maybe it's the aspirations and what you grow up with. But U.S., if I had to sort of guess, most startups target begin with the U.S. versus other countries. I would say not like 50 or 60%, but maybe 90%, so 80 or 90%. So the U.S. is really top of mind for Israeli founders.
Right. Again, just to add to what Gil and Hillel said earlier, and going back to what Michael mentioned at the beginning of this session, I think the book Startup Nation will summarize a lot of the points very well, although this book was written many years ago. Hillel talked about the fact that we have people coming from different places around the world, and we have, different languages. And think about Babylon for a second. So Israel, we're talking about the melting pot. It's a very small place where you have people coming from all over the world, and they need to work together. They need to find a way to work with one another. And you need a lot of creativity to find your way to, you immigrate to a new place, you need to immediately find a job. If you don't find a job, Gil mentioned you don't want to work for somebody else. So, you have to create some income. So it's very much part of the culture. Israelis, for those of you who know Israelis, and you heard the term chutzpah, right? So we don't take things for granted. We ask questions. We always like to challenge the other person. When you talk to an Israeli, the first word in every sentence will be no, right? That's the way Israelis talk. First they say no, because they have their own opinion. And that also, you might laugh at that, but that's part of who Israelis are. And their mind constantly think about what else can we do? What is the next thing that we can come up with? And again, Gil mentioned the universities. I have to also mention the military service. For those of you who don't know, military service in Israel is compulsory. So when you are 18, you don't go to college, you serve in the IDF. And the IDF throughout the 73 years of, since the establishment of Israel changed a lot, like many other militaries around the world, and became more and more technological. So we see less infantry and more technologies that are being developed in the military. So when you think about someone who just graduated high school and has an opportunity to have really hands-on experience developing some of the most advanced technologies in the world. So when these soldiers, I wanted to say kids, and then I feel really old when I say it, but when they finish their military service and they go and they think about all the things that they learned and all the technologies that they experienced, of course they take a lot of this into the civilian world, and a lot of what we see in medical, in space technologies, are actually things that were developed or initiated in the military, in the Israeli military. So that's another aspect that contribute to the fact that we see this innovation coming from Israel.
It's interesting you mentioned the military service, and I grew up in the United States. I spent time in Israel. I didn't serve in the military here or there, but in the Startup Nation book uses the military, a discussion of the military, but also talks about how the organization is much flatter, and how in the United States, if you're in a room in the military and the coffee pot is empty, the lowest ranking person in the room would have to go and empty the coffee pot, or change the coffee. And in Israel, it's whoever's sitting the closest gets more coffee. And it's from my experience with Israelis and getting to know Israelis and getting to know their mindset, and the way Israelis will question authority and challenge and use, you know, that's the way they're wired from, I think, as an observer, not from, you know, having been in the military like the two of you, but that being wired that way is part of what makes Israelis more in tune with entrepreneurship and with being willing to take a challenge and move forward on a startup. I don't know if you would agree with that.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I'll tell you more than that. You know, in business, networking is very, very important. And when two Israelis meet, and it doesn't matter where around the world, the first question will be, where have you been in the military? And the second question will be, where did you study? So yes, here in the US, we know the alumni concept, but in Israel, it's the, you know, we don't have 6 degrees of separation. I mean, most of the people that you'll find in cybersecurity world or industry, I don't know the percentage, but I will say that a good chunk of them, maybe 70% of them, served in the same unit in the military. So people know people, everybody knows everyone, it's part of the network. When someone starts his own business, he will look at the people that he knows from his military service or people that he worked with in the past and will just bring that, you know, those people into the new business or the new company that person is establishing. So it's a very small place that people rely on one another, and the network is very, very strong. And again, it's because it's also because it's a very small place, and because we don't have that hierarchy and facade that will, you know, stand between people. At least not like we see in other places.
I'd be interested to hear the two of you talk about the craziest idea that you saw succeed. Gil, I know you've seen a lot of in your time here in Silicon Valley working with Israelis. What can you think of anything where you said this just can't make it and you were wrong?
Wow, there's many such examples. I think that's the nature of startup investing, and especially you know, frighteningly early startup investing, which what we do, which is very early on. I don't know if I have sort of a standout examples, but certainly many of, you know, the unicorns, the companies valued over $1 billion. I distinctly remember meeting a few of them and saying, how is this going to work, right? Meaning, you know, Monday.com in Israel, for those that know the company, or other companies that JoyTunes with an amazing founder that teaches you to play the piano through and guitar through a mobile application. I was like, how are you going to do it? And here we are with amazing successes. So there's definitely I've seen our fair share. But what I think is interesting is even those companies that did not succeed, the mindset is such that, okay, I'm going to give it a go, but if it doesn't succeed, I'm going to do something else, and maybe that will succeed. And so even founders that we've seen that maybe we were as investors, you know, right about that specific idea, we are often wrong about the founders or the team, because then they continue and do something else. And there's multiple examples in the Israeli ecosystem where perhaps the company didn't work out, but it spawned out so many other successes over the years.
Sharon, how about you? What zany Israeli ideas have you seen?
Well, it's not that the idea itself was crazy. You know, Gil talked about some unicorns here in California that were established or originated by Israelis. That I have to give kudos to Asaf, one from Hippo. When I heard Hippo Insurance, when I first heard about their idea, I was like, seriously, what do you know about the insurance market in the US? How are you going to convince people to just ditch everything they know about, you know, AIG and all those big insurance companies that have been around for hundreds of years, and do that? And they became a unicorn within what, 2-3 years? It's like even the the span of the during the pandemic, they managed to raise so much money, and so they just recruit so many people and expanded their operation. But there are a lot of ideas that you think that they will be crazy, and then you just being surprised. There is a company that I just don't remember the name right now. It will come to me obviously after this session. That help people that are paralyzed to walk. So it's like a robot that they attach something to your body and they do the impossible, right?
WeWalk.
What is the name?
WeWalk. R-E-Walk.
Right, rework. And there are a lot of ideas that are coming from Israel that, even the Israelis who said, okay, we are a tiny country in the Middle East, and we are going to shoot a vehicle to space, and it's not just a landscape, and that's Bereshit. And when you think about the not just to space but to the moon, and who are the countries that managed to actually land on the moon? And then Israel came with very, very limited resources and a group of people with very limited experience, just trying, it started like a science project in high school, and all of a sudden the whole country is behind it, and they were that close to actually land on the moon. And going back to what Gil said, I think it wasn't even 48 hours, and they said, okay, we are going to go for Bereshit 2, we are going for the next one. It didn't even take, a week for them to mourn on the failure of the first attempt, but they were like, okay, we'll find the funds and we will do it again. We will, and that's part of what we're talking about.
For me, and you'll have to help me with the name, and it's been a while, but there was a technology for a medical technology for getting a camera inside, right, into your body, and instead of connecting to a wire, they made it wireless, and you just swallow the camera in a pill, right? What was that called?
Yeah, I can't remember, but I know which one you're talking about.
Pill cam.
Yeah.
It's a swallowable medical camera. Pill cam. It's very easy.
Oh, so we have a question from one of the participants, or from one of the attendees here. Asks, now that relations between Israel and the Middle East, other countries in the Middle East are opening up, do you expect to see startups expanding to those countries, either separate from or in addition to the U.S.? And I'm thinking about UAE primarily. I assume that the questioner, I will admit, is Emily Yukich, also from Fox Rothschild. But what do you think?
Well, I don't think it will be instead of the U.S. Obviously, going back to everything we said earlier about Israelis will look for opportunities wherever they are, wherever they feel that there is the right market for them. I think that it's a great move for Israeli startups, because VCs or other investors that were reluctant to invest in Israeli startups because of political or whatever reasons, it feels that now it opened up more opportunities. Obviously, I don't know how many people know, but we did have trade and investments and collaborations. It was, under the surface, with some of those countries, but now everything can just come up to the surface, and we'll see more of that. I don't think it's going to be instead of the US. I mean, the US is a huge market. It's very advanced. It's not just about investment that people are looking for, but they're looking also to sell their technologies. And at the end of the day, the biggest corporates are here. We see more of potential market in the US, but obviously that's a new whole market that is being opened up, for Israeli companies, investors and companies at the same time, by the way.
Sure.
Let's talk about trends in the future. What are you seeing, or what do you think you'll be seeing next coming out of Israel and here to California? Gil.
Yeah, so I think what we see is the trends we see in Israel, I think, track also some of the trends we see in the US. So increased usage of AIs across all verticals, and maybe some that were harder to disrupt. So as Sharon mentioned, if you talked about insurance technologies 5 years ago, people are like, "Ah, that's crazy." And you see insurtech and financial technologies, and I think we've seen a ramp up of those technologies in the last few years. I think agri-tech will continue to be meaningful, but also digital healthcare. I think digital healthcare perhaps took a while to ramp up out of Israel. Medical devices and other type of device-related technologies were always in abundance, but digital healthcare, I think we're now beginning to see a spike coming out of Israel as AI technologies become more prevalent. So that's maybe one domain to be on the lookout for increased innovation out of Israel.
Right, I agree with Gil. Israel is known for its technologies in terms of AI. I mean, everything which is software, AI, machine learning, and the more the world adapts more of these technologies, this is where we'll see more Israeli companies coming to the market. Going back just a second to what Gil mentioned about medical device versus digital health, medical device takes years, decades to develop, and the investment is enormous. When we look at digital health, it's more software, is where where the Israelis are stronger, and now that it's being more and more adopted in the US and other places, this is where we see an influx of Israeli technologies, and that goes to almost anything. The adaptation of technologies, the industry 4.0, IoT, and all of that. This is where we'll see more and more Israeli companies coming to the US. And it's not just the hierarchy in Israel is flat and the world is flat and all of this, but we've seen in the last year, the year of pandemic, that it became more easier for very early stage companies to actually network and showcase their products and their technologies, and that also allows companies that found it more difficult, more expensive to venture into the US. Now, again, because of technology and due to technology, that will allow them to come even in an earlier stage than we see them currently coming to the US.
Do you think that what we've experienced in the last year and the pandemic and the ability to connect immediately around the world on a video like this is going to change the way that Israelis access the US market, and that Americans and American entrepreneurs are able to work with Israelis? Gil?
I think to some extent, for sure. I mean, I think most companies are now, and individuals are comfortable being on Zoom and engaging. I think the question is post-pandemic, and if you look at the numbers in Israel, California, and other places, it seems thankfully to be dramatically improving. The big question is what will folks do? Are they going to go back to the office? Maybe to not the same extent. I do personally still believe in the importance of having a physical presence close to your market. I think it really helps helps on the hiring front. And so still many of the B2B businesses, I think, will sort of, you will be able to increase your likelihood to succeed as an Israeli company if you have a strong presence in the US. So even though most definitely it has helped, I don't think it sort of will replace completely the need to have physical presence in your market.
I agree with Gil. It definitely shortened the gap. But I think people are just hungry for the physical, especially after the last year that we had. What I think we will see now is spike of people just running to meet with each other, and then it will be a balance between virtual meetings and discussions. Obviously, I think that we will see the initial conversations maybe starting on physically, not virtually, because people want to look you in the eyes and get that trust, building the trust, and then a lot of the negotiations and the back and forth later on can be continued virtually. That's my opinion, because I'm a great believer in the physical connection between people. I think people want to go back to the networking event, the exhibitions, the conferences. There's something superficial about holding your life virtually, and especially when you want to build long-term relationship, people do want to see, to get to meet with people personally.
So look, we only have a couple more minutes, but I do want to give you a chance to, offer the keys to the kingdom and let folks know, what are ways that they can become engaged and involved and work with these Israeli companies and get in at the earliest of stages.
Sure, I'll start since you said ladies first. I'll go back to some of the names that Hillel mentioned earlier. There are 3 great binational funds that are available. And the way to receive those fund money or grant money is actually when you have one Israeli entity and one US entity working together on an R&D project. There are 3. One of them is focusing on agriculture, that's the Bart Foundation. There is one which is focusing more on health and general research. And then there is the 3rd one, which is the Bird Foundation, which focus on anything that you can imagine, from energy to infrastructure to medical to agriculture and so on and so forth. They provide a grant which is up to $1 million per project. And I think this is a great opportunity for folks here to meet their counterparts in Israel and work with them. I'm happy to send information to anyone who is interested. Some of them do have representatives, by the way, here in California. And this is something which is accessible to really small startups, all the way to big corporates, to universities, research institutes, and so on. So this is one way to collaborate and find partners on the other side of the world. And we see for the last 40 years how a lot of those relationships grew up to acquisitions, to long-term relationship between the businesses, and so on and so forth. So this is one area. Another area is the government support that is being provided by the Israeli government through the Innovation Authority. The Innovation Authority is the body in Israel that provide assistance, provide also some grant money to Israeli startups. They just announced recently that there is a call for companies to establish 3 new accelerators in Israel. So if anyone is in the building accelerators business, this is an opportunity to work with the Israeli government to build one in Israel. And they have different accelerators and they take delegations, and they are a great resource for a lot of information about opportunities in Israel. Then we have some NGOs and nonprofit organizations, just like the CICC and others. We have Startup Nation Central, which is a great database and great resource center for information about startups in Israel and connecting with Israeli startups. And there are different communities that are part of the Health IL and Agri IL and so many others. There's a very long list. I cannot even list all of them, that are communities that are being supported by the government and different agencies of the government. We also have here in California, beside the CICC, there is also the Economic Mission that is based in San Francisco, which is part of the Israeli Ministry of Finance. That's another great resource through the Export Institute in Israel to learn about opportunities, to learn about Israeli companies. And if you need more information, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to put my contact information in the chat. We are here currently virtually, but hopefully soon enough to curate more conferences, bring delegations of different businesses. We always talk about startups, but not all of them are startups. Some of them are in low tech, some of them in other areas. And I'm happy to assist in anything that is needed.
Yeah, I have nothing to add to what Sharon said. It's an amazing resource for all of this. I will just send my email now to on chat, so you can reach out to me if I can be of help. Specifically, folks thinking about the Israeli startup ecosystem, investment ecosystem, or the corresponding ecosystem that Sharon described here of startups and investors in the US. It's probably where I can add most value and help direct people to folks. So feel free to reach out.
So I want to thank Sharon and Gil. I can assure you, I've known them both for many years. They're great resources, and they're accessible, and they're here. And to those of you who are curious or interested or wondering about doing things in or with Israel, I encourage you to take them up on their offer, and also to look to Hillel and to the consulate in Los Angeles also as a resource. It's a fantastic place. They do fantastic things, and there's a lot of opportunity. And Israelis, if nothing else, are hungry for the opportunity to tell you about what they're doing and share. And I encourage everyone to look into that. And with that, I'll say thank you to Global Lava, to Michael and Sharon and Darren for hosting us today and for letting us spend a little time together. And I'll throw it back to you and thank everyone for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you to all our panelists. Yeah, Michael, again, I just want to thank Fox Rothschild for everything you guys do for all the startups and even, as Sharon said, the larger companies. So I think it was our last event that another partner of the LA office, Dan Wu, was a panelist for our Korean event that we did, because he does a lot of cross-border transactions with Korea, US to Korea. And Ben Burkhardt is also another guy who lives for startup and high growth companies, always willing to, I'm not going to say it works for free, but he's always seemed very willing to help give his guidance and counsel, at least initially, simply just to help the companies that at least we've introduced them to for free. So, Sharon, if I may, can I get those resources that you mentioned? Because I've had people ask, not only I've seen it in the chat, but people ask me over my own text, is it okay if I get with you after this and we can put together a list of some of those public sector resource, or private too, and then I can email them to all the attendees?
Of course, not a problem.
Okay, especially because if somebody registered but they weren't able to make it, at least they'll get that, because that's one of the things we love to do at Global Lava is give tangible tools to accelerate the growth. We love the policy and the strategy, but we want people to walk away from all our events going, oh yes, I have this and I have this, and now I'm going to go track that down.
Of course,
Okay.
It's going to be a very long list of resources, and one might be get lost in all this information. I am happy to share with you some of those resources, but really, if anybody wants something specific, instead of scrolling down through like 30 different links or more, just shoot me an email and I'll direct you to the right place. But happy to send you some links afterwards, Michael, no problem.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you to everybody again, and for everybody about to sign off, May 5th, we have free money from the US government. Speaking of public sector support, the USAID, which I believe is under the State Department, has billions of dollars to spend to promote US companies' trade with Africa. So sometimes that's grants, sometimes non-dilutive grants, sometimes that's equity stakes. Very rare occasion, US government partners with a company equity-based, and then just the tools and the toolkits that they have for Uncle Sam to be a partner in a good way, a rare but good way. Sharon, unless you have anything else to say, Darren, I'll turn it over to you just for some last words. Become a member of Lava. I'll say it first. Darren, you can say it better.
Great. Well, thank you, Michael. Thank you, Sharon, Sharon, Michael, and Gil. Thank you for being on the panel, and obviously thanks to the Consul General, who's no longer with us at this time because he's having dinner. But thank you, everyone. As Michael mentioned, next week we have the Global Lava on Africa, and then we have the First Time Entrepreneurs Workshop. But as he said, send us over your recent raises and join us as a member or as a committee fellow. Thank you all for being with us tonight, and have a nice night. Take care.